So it's not by chance that I picked the headline "Time to Repurpose." I think we really are in a transition, and this transition, I think, impacts everybody. And this is not an understatement. I think we're seeing a lot of shifts right now. Everybody's talking about fourth industrial revolution, digitization, digital transformation, digital era. I've been very privileged in the last 2 years of my life to work in a role that was primarily looking at working with one of our biggest customers in innovation. And I think what I've seen in the last 2 years has been both fascinating, but also a bit intimidating. We really are entering a shift. And I think most of our institutions, most of our frameworks prepared us for the industrial era that we're in. And we'll unpack the industrial era. And yet we're entering a digital era. And none of our structures, institutions, both how we prepare in education, business models, have prepared us for what is really happening right now. And we need to make a shift. So let's unpack that. And please, by the way, as we go along, stop me. I'm going to play a video since it's a small room. I don't know how it will work on the film. It gives context.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. So my question was not really much of a question. Well, it's kind of like a statement. So let's say we're in 2019 and it's the elections, and a child wants to vote, but they don't have that opportunity to vote because they are underage. What if we make this change? What if the child studies all the things that different political parties want to change in the country, and they understand the depth of what they're doing, and they go through 1 or 2 assessments, and they have like the voting intelligence of an adult? Because just because somebody has a different age than another person does not necessarily mean that they should have less access to things because of their age or anything like that. But like many adults expect children to be to not have as much intelligence as adults, but if the child has surprisingly high intelligence, but they are still not allowed that just because of their age. It's not because of what's on the outside. It's because of what's on the inside.
Two things about that video. If you think about yourself when you were 10 years old, would you ever be able to stand in parliament and articulate quite clearly that you want to vote? And it's not by chance. I don't think this boy is a genius. I think we're entering what you call an information era, where people's ability, they're absorbing much faster and they're growing much more intelligent. The other thing you need to keep in mind is this boy is also your customer. And your modern customer is more knowledgeable, more in control of the conversation than you've ever known. You're no longer driving the narrative, you're only engaging. And we'll unpack that a little bit later. But let's first start with the triple effect. I think the triple effect really starts to explain the change that we're in. But why is it important? Technology. Technology has changed everything. This little thing here, which is a smartphone, didn't exist 10 years ago, literally. And now this is our entire life. And this is going to go beyond our entire life. We do everything here. But there are two fascinating things about the smartphone is that mobility and cloud combined with the internet have made sure that the way we consume and access services is completely different. If I can't access it on my phone now, I'm not interested. And that's going to become faster and more prevalent than ever. You're in media. Typically, media was broadcast. I honestly believe the broadcast age is dead. If you look at how people stream content today, it's a completely new world and paradigm shift, and you start need to understand your customer. That 10-year-old boy is never going to switch on a TV to watch stuff. And if you think about the demographic of Uganda, it should get your mind thinking, because 60% of the country is under 18. They're digital. About 80% is probably under 30. It's a completely different culture and society that you're in. But it's not slowing down. If you look at the improvements in technology, it'll be very difficult to unpack it because it's not a technology conversation. AI, machine learning, what it's doing to how information services are becoming more predictive and automated completely changed the paradigm shift. when you start to add big data, when you start to add blockchain, 3D printing, the world will be completely different in the next 2 to 5 years. But there's so many fascinating things about these companies that you should keep in mind. Obviously, the first is that they're asset light. The new generation of companies were not born with brick and mortar. They didn't need 10,000, $100 million. They didn't need infrastructure. They could start a whole enterprise and change the world from a desktop or a garage, and now from a mobile app. But the other thing about these companies that is also prevalent is that they're continuously evolving their user experience as you use the service. Everybody here in this room uses WhatsApp. There's no doubt about that. Facebook. You guys are going to start using Netflix. You're exactly in competition with Netflix today, by the way. You might not know it, but this is your reality. Some of you might even have Netflix, and you might even be using Netflix more than, more than your ordinary channels. But we'll unpack that later. But the things that stand out for me, I think, that are not so obvious about these companies, the ones that really, really, should start to make you wake up, is that these companies have completely changed two things that were fundamental to companies: geographical boundaries of competition. So you and New Vision, you are competing against Monitor, or you're competing against newspapers or media companies in your country. Now, with the internet era, the information era, the digital era, that's gone. And I'll give an example in the next slide. The other thing is product boundaries of competition. So Amazon didn't start out as a media company. They started as an online shop. And now they're in everything. They're in content, they're in media, they're in drones, they're in the biggest cloud computing company in the world. I'll unpack those things a little bit. But what it has done is that in the information era, you are no longer competing with the guy next door. You're no longer competing with the guy in your boundaries. You're competing to really, and I'll stress this a few times in this presentation, you're competing to engage a digital consumer. You're competing for their attention. You're competing for my attention. And you're competing for my attention with Amazon, with WhatsApp, with Facebook, with Netflix. Because you will not get my attention in a day if I'm on these platforms. And if you cannot get my attention, eventually you'll not be able to monetize me. So it doesn't really matter what model you have or whatever aspects, however you think you're making money and your model might be advertising, you don't have my attention, you don't have my money. But let's unpack that a little bit later. And it comes back down, the whole thing comes back down to the customer. We need to understand that the old models of push don't exist. The control is completely not in your hands. The control is in the hands of the customer, the consumer. That 10-year-old boy video is not an anomaly. You might have kids, and if you start to see the younger kids, how they behave, and if you really understand them, it'll blow your mind. But it's not just kids. What has happened is as we've had more access to information, as we've had more access to new models and new services, we want to control more. We have broader choice, but we also really are a lot more knowledgeable and informed about what we want. It's not just a 10-year-old boy, it's all of us. And that's something businesses need to think about. It's how much of your content is really engaging. How much of your service is really about the consumer, not something you want to push out there. And how much feedback do you get about your content or your media or your service that actually makes it relevant and prevalent. And how do you get value? We don't pay for these services, with the exception of Netflix, of course. But I mean, the thing about these models is that they're completely shifting how the consumer perceives value. If WhatsApp is free, if you launch a product, why should I pay for it if I can't get value first? And make no mistake, all of us are already in that mode. We're not yet consciously thinking about it, but subconsciously we're getting used to getting experiences which we perceive to be free and return value afterwards. That will completely change any model of first selling me a product and trying to monetize me. And yes, it's time, but your demographic is not slowing down. I talked about geographical boundaries of competition. I'm going to unpack this with one example because in the interest of time, there are quite a few things to cover in this presentation. You all know DSTV. You all know MultiChoice. We probably all have either had a subscription or watched somebody who has a subscription, and mainly for people who love football. But DSTV is one of the biggest institutions in South Africa. It's probably one of the biggest companies in Africa. It's really changed our lives in terms of content and access to sports and a lot of other things. But something fascinating is happening in South Africa. You know, as the internet becomes more ubiquitous, as broadband becomes clearer at homes, we start streaming. You know, our TVs are getting smarter. You know, I have a fiber connection at home. I'm fighting with my wife right now about canceling my subscription because for me, I absolutely love football. And that's the only reason I'm paying for DSTV. But basically, over the last 6 months, since we got fiber, I've watched less and less DSTV. 200,000 people in South Africa in the last 18 months have canceled their premium subscription. 200,000. If you put that into context, that's 200,000 times 1,000 rand a month. Over 18 months, DSTV has lost $500 million of revenue. And who have they lost that revenue to? Netflix. It was in the previous slide. Guess what? Netflix doesn't exist in South Africa. They don't have an office, they don't have a salesperson. And yet they're taking out one of the biggest institutions. That's your reality. New Vision will not be taken out by Monitor. I'm not saying you're going to be taken out. You'll be taken out by Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Media when people start to get smart TVs and internet to the homes, which is already starting to happen, and the young generation are online streaming. They will not observe your content, only if you do not pivot. I give you that example because you need to start to understand the information era, the internet era, the digital era has completely changed models and have completely changed your boundaries. And this is not going to slow down. This is just the start of a completely new paradigm shift in how we do business and how we see the consumer. Let's talk about product boundaries of competition. This example is more relevant to people in banking. I bank with FNB Bank. I literally can buy and sell my house in FNB Bank. I can check my license fees, I can resell my car, I can check evaluation for my car. I can do about 100 things on my FNB Bank platform. The FNB Bank CEO will tell you that I don't sell banking services, I sell financial services off my digital platform. They have 2,500 developers. Their user experience is incredible. You can open a bank account with a selfie. Why do I give that example? FNB Bank understands that they can use their reach to expand the services that they give people. Amazon started as an online retail shop. Amazon now is the biggest cloud computing company. Why these examples are not arbitrary. What happens is that in the digital era, we start to engage a consumer and start to understand what he wants next. And we expand to that domain or service, which means that you will be completely wiped out if you're in business by somebody that didn't really exist in your sphere, but somebody who is literally engaging the consumer, getting the data, understanding their experiences. This is real. You need to understand, let me emphasize this, clearly, you need to understand that you're not competing with the guy next door. You're competing to get my attention. And those companies that I showed you, first understand that game. They're already ahead of the game. They are getting your attention without you knowing it. You spend more time on these platforms than you do on any of the traditional services. And you know what they do? They start to understand what are the services that are relevant to this geography of Uganda, and they'll give you those services on their platform. This is real. The last point is value. I talked about it in the last slide because we have to unpack a few things. I'll move on. You also need to understand models have changed. If you download an app today, the likelihood is that they're going to give you a 7-day free trial, or try it for 7 days, or try it for a month. And the only reason they do that is they know that they cannot monetize you unless they give you a feel of the experience and you love it, and then you can give them back value. That's fundamentally important. It doesn't matter if you have a fantastic app, if you launch it and you tell guys, pay me 100,000 subscription fee for the app, and the guys have not got the concept or felt the value, they won't use it. It's also because they want to control their journey. It's also because they feel smart, and they have a reason to feel smart, because we are getting smarter. I showed you that 10-year-old video because the internet era has democratized information. We know everything about anything. If we go online, we learn. And the reality as human beings is that we are bullish about our own knowledge. We're stubborn. We feel we know. The more access to information we get, the more demanding we become. And that reality is not slowing down. It doesn't matter what expertise you did or what you studied at university. Today, anybody can get access to that knowledge. And the younger people are getting access to that knowledge much faster than you would like to think. But that's changing the game. And the reality is that access to that knowledge is not slowing down. Today, you can literally get free university degree courses anywhere. You can Google any or have YouTube of anything. This is really our modern reality. And this is not slowing down. I will repeat this several times. You are simply in a race to capture the attention of a digital consumer. You might not know it, but every day I have choice. I spend less time on your platform. I'm not saying this just because you're New Vision, even if you're FNB Bank or whatever it is. Because when WhatsApp launches financial services in India, as Rashmi said in the panel, WhatsApp is one of the most seamless user experiences for me. So why wouldn't I use that interface to continue to bank? Because I use it anyway. This perception of that you're in a race to capture a digital consumer is real. It should be the thing that keeps you up at night, nothing else. That we'll unpack later. So, but what is the digital era? I mean, we talk about this, and by the way, this is not me giving you answers. It's unpacking based on what I've seen in the last 2 years of my personal journey. I think we talk a lot about digitization. We talk a lot about fourth industrial revolution. And the simplest way to understand it is that we are changing and evolving as people and consumers. when we talk about, and we'll give a lot of examples, and you'll always see the consumer, the customer in a lot of the presentations, the reality is that any business today has a chance to be successful or to evolve if the real thing that they're doing is focusing on the customer, not their product. We'll unpack that later. Because really, when I started the presentation talking about the fact that we're in a shift from the industrial era to the digital era, that era made that we built products and we sold them to the market. It doesn't matter what your brand is. All companies exist like that. New Vision has certain products. Your product is the newspapers, your TV channels or your radio channels. You have a specific content that over years you've programmed to be on those channels. You tweak it here and there. But you don't think radically. You think, how do I make these products better for the consumer? And yet the consumer has changed. You're not thinking about, does this product still make sense to the consumer? And the reason why you don't think like that is that we're completely designed to sell our products. We're completely designed to have domain expertise. Whether you're a contributing editor or managing editor, you might lose your job to some kid on Twitter who's suddenly sharing the news. But coming back to the digital consumer, certain things that you should take and keep. Simplicity, instant gratification, choice, convenience. These things matter to me now. They matter to you because someone else has given me this. I really want it now. You know, if we had the whole day, we could talk all day about how even today as people, when we go for a service, be it at a bank or somewhere else, we'll be complaining in 10 minutes because we're wondering, why am I standing in this line for 10 minutes? Our minds have already changed. Our aspect of service and convenience has completely changed, and we don't realize that it's being changed by these players who are studying your behavior through your data and giving you that service instantly. Instant gratification is clear. And you know, it's crazy in 2018 that you can still go to a bank and fill in forms. You know, you don't want to sign anywhere. You don't want to fill in forms. You're even irritated when you speak to a call center person. You don't get this, but it's actually happening to you because someone is giving you choice and convenience. And yet that choice and convenience, you don't really apply it to your own models. You should. The consumer has changed. And on top of that, he is more knowledgeable and in control of the conversation than ever. Back to the 10-year-old boy, back to that video I started with. That is your modern day consumer. You can't tell him what to do anymore. You can't, your brand value doesn't mean anything because it did when that product was a need. And as they move and they become more knowledgeable and they get more choice, you can only capture them if you're giving them a seamless or an exact same experience. Everything about the digital era or the information era, the fourth industrial revolution, from a business perspective will just be your ability to evolve and adapt. Everything. Everything will be your ability to understand the consumer. And it should be easier for you guys who are in media because you're obviously getting a lot of feedback on WhatsApp and Twitter. I mean, your boss has more followers than more people in this country. But those are the channels that give you an aspect. Engage and listen. They control the narrative. And I will come back to command and control, but command and control does not exist. The other thing that is fascinating about the digital era that should also keep you up at night is digital equalizes opportunity. When you look at the price point of computing resources, cloud computing, the ability to start a business or to solve a problem, it has gone down exponentially. So somebody can literally start a content company in a garage, literally, you know, and use a cell phone to create some arbitrary content. And if it's fun and engaging, he could be competing. You could be competing for your attention with him. You know, and the fact that they might not be watching normal TV, so you might not even have the channel to engage them. The point about this is that it doesn't take $100 million anymore to start a business. Your size is not your competitive advantage. The only thing you have that is your competitive advantage is your ability to engage a consumer and to deeply solve his problem. If you really start to see these young people, they're fascinated about solving problems and impact. And here's the scary thing is that they build something cool and they give it away for free. Open platforms, collaboration, sharing is a more important model than trying to force or control. This should also keep you up at night. Let's be very clear about this. It's a matter of time. Your disruption is not going to come from Monitor, and I have a lot of respect for them, or the other guys who have newspapers or Red Pepper with their dodgy content. Your disruption is going to come from someone else who's going to solve that seamless consumer experience. How much of your stuff do you broadcast on YouTube? How much of it do you broadcast on Facebook Live? Isn't that where your people are now? I mean, of course, you can look at the demographics of Uganda and access to technology might be slowing down that journey, but it's not going to be there for long. What I see in my line of work is that literally in about 2 to 3 years, most people have smartphones. The smartphone price will almost be ubiquitous, will come down exponentially. internet penetration will eventually reach everybody. And here's the thing that most people don't understand. The younger generation are born digital. The constraints that you have in your mind only exist in your mind. It doesn't exist in theirs. They're just absorbing. They love technology. They play with it. It's natural to them. It's second nature. When you start to think, oh no, but it's going to take Uganda 10 years because they don't have smartphones, you go and give a guy a smartphone in a rural village in Karamoja today and he's 5 years old. Give him a smartphone and go back after 6 months. He'll tell you stuff that will blow your mind because this is their era. This is norm to them. So this technology revolution is shifting society, and we'll unpack what this means. This means that your competition is everywhere. But this also means that you can die overnight. So growth is exponential means the way things scale today is completely different from the way they scale. There's so many examples we can give. But in summary, social platforms take over. Today you can create a really cool experience. I mean, you guys on WhatsApp, you know the drill. I don't need to give you the examples. If I send you a WhatsApp, it could reach a group which is completely randomly independent in the next 5 minutes. It could go around the world in 10 minutes. Imagine you have a cool experience that somebody loves. And they start saying, oh my God, Paul created this cool app or this experience. It does so and so. You need to download it. The reality is that it took the airline industry 64 years to get to 50 million users. It took Pokemon Go 19 days. That's your reality. Scale is completely different. But that scale, that way you can grow exponentially, means you can die exponentially. Some kids out there could create some cool content or TV experience that people really love. And you would lose all your viewership. Not in 100 years. In a few months. That's your reality. That's only if you're not staying really, really close to the consumer. And I keep stressing the consumer because they have changed. The information era has changed the game. You know, historically, information was a source of power and control. The internet has democratized that. If I really wanted to fly a plane, I could invest about 3 months and go through YouTube videos and stuff and know how to fly a plane. This video that I actually got from Robert, there's another video of a 6-year-old boy in the cockpit of, I think it's an Etihad. And this boy is telling the captain that I know how to fly a plane. And of course, the captain is a 6-year-old boy, so you're engaging him, entertaining him. 4 minutes later, this captain his mouth is about to drop because he's telling him about all things, flaps, whatever, when this happens. They can do that today. Because if he just if he's really interested in a plane when he's 4, he just goes to YouTube and starts absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. That's your reality. That's your consumer. That's your world. And yes, in your world, there's still people who are 75 and go and buy a newspaper, but that world is slowing down. That's true. It is true, because my dad used to buy a newspaper. The important thing, and I'll talk about co-creation later, but co-creation is absolutely important because you can no longer push a product. You can only engage. You build an experience with the customer. Even if you have a really cool idea, you test it out on the market. Co-creation is also important because we control, we know. I go back to the 10-year-old video because I really like it as context at the beginning of the presentation. That boy knows what he wants. He's telling Parliament at 10 that I want to vote, and I know why I want to vote, and if you give me an assessment and I pass it, I will vote. And when they laugh at him, he looks at them like, are you guys mad? Why are you laughing? I really do want to vote. And that's what will happen when you give him that content of yours. He'll be like, yeah, this doesn't mean anything to me. So every experience or product you deliver, it is never good enough. We'll talk about the consumer. So it doesn't mean that you cannot capture the attention. It means that you have to continuously, every day, you have to be innovating every day. Every day you need to be thinking. There is no day you stop. So even if you think you figured it out, someone else is already improving their experience. When I talk about it's always day one, it's the whole Amazon thing. Amazon will tell you, there's a quote that comes next, is that once a consumer will always be dissatisfied. We focus continuously on evolving the experience. Innovation is not an option. It is a way of existing. It means you continuously evolve. I know Penelope does 40 over 40, but you know, the question is that does that still really make sense to people? Does it really still excite them? It probably did, because we know we want to be in the newspaper, we want status and stuff. Do the young people really care about that? Do they not care more about impact? Should the content still be about, oh, this is Edgar, he's cool, he did a presentation, he's going to change your life? Yeah, but what is he really doing? You know, I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that, are you thinking about, you know, what is it? If Paul should ask his kids, do they read this? Does it make sense? Is it engaging to them? And of course, headlines and certain aspects and news is still important. But do people actually get news from New Vision, or do I get it from Twitter? You know, when I worked in the UK, I used to religiously go to newvision.co.ug every morning. It was already online, trying to be up to speed on what's happening on Monitor or whatever. I can't remember the last time I actually went to your website. I mean, I still get pockets of your news from Twitter occasionally when I'm there. Does the channel still make sense? And should it really still be on the website, or really your mobile app content is richer and more engaging than your website? Because how many people actually still use computers to check stuff apart from when they're in the desk? How much do you spend as much time on your mobile phone or your computer? Where do you spend your time? Or even reading some physical infrastructure? And do you think about these things? But to your point, I mean, you need to think about these things. You need to think about the consumer. You need to think, who is my customer? Where do I engage him? How do I engage him? Am I engaging him? Or am I just pushing stuff out there to him? When you focus on the customer, again, you'll see the theme of customer and consumer. When your sole focus is on the customer, it'll always make sense. Because if you're so focused on the customer, you're always listening. You're always engaging, you're always feeling. We spoke for about 4 hours with Robert in August about command and control and the control shifting. And is any business today immune to this disruption? No. Can every business evolve? Yes. But you're going to be radically different. Will Vision or Media Group look the same way in 5 years? 100% no. If they are alive. Completely no. I have no idea what she'll look like. But this is the reality. And that's the reality of the steps you need to take. Amazon is a fascinating company. If you really want to understand a lot of the shifts and leaders who really get transition, and no company is perfect, let's be clear. We're all human, we all have flaws. Amazon is huge, big, so they also have a lot of issues. But Amazon is growing incredibly well because Jeff Bezos, who is the owner, and Google him, and not just because of his divorce, but Google him for all the things he says, day one, and a lot of cool stuff that he says. But he's always had this fascinating focus on the customer. It's about the customer. And this is just one quote. I have a lot of slides on Jeff Bezos, and you can't put them there. But there's some things about Amazon that stand out, that are incredible. First of all, how diverse their product portfolio is. But the product portfolio is not driven by some smart guys in R&D. It's driven by consumer needs. Amazon will be willing to kill a product if the consumer doesn't need it. When was the last time Vision Group killed a product? I'm sure you have. But really, when was the last time you really killed a proper product? Bouquet the newspaper doesn't make sense. I'm not saying it does. And we're going to stop that. Yeah? Think about that. Because we exist as companies, and we'll unpack it the next slide. We exist as products. We build products and we sell them. That's why it's difficult. We don't solve needs. We don't evolve with consumers. We sell our products. And what we do, we get more marketing people when the numbers go down. We do more PR. We throw it out in more newspapers and stuff. And guess what? The young generation, they don't care. I don't care. It's like this stuff stopped solving my need in 2006. I'm just giving an example. It's not that it did. But if it stopped in 2006, it doesn't matter how much you push on TV. I'm not going to go back there. And that's your reality. But if you're focusing on the consumer, you start to think about how you create your content, because people still need news and content. They still need to engage. This is specific to New Vision. Some interesting facts about Amazon before we move to the next slide. Amazon started in 1994, the same year as MTN Group. Amazon today, they hit $1 trillion valuation. They lost a bit over the year, and this is also the scary thing. I mean, they lost 200 billion in a few months. This is how volatile things are. Amazon Group, just to put into perspective, from September 2017 to September 2018, they doubled their valuation. They grew from $500 billion company to $1 trillion company in 1 year, just to give an aspect of exponentiality. In that 1 year, they could buy the top 150 companies in Africa and still have change. Just to put into context about the world and how fast it's growing. And yet Amazon what they do is not rocket science. What they do, everybody can do. The great thing about information era and technology being democratized is that it's no longer rocket science to build apps and to access information. And it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Which means that also, by the way, make no mistake, there are tons of Ugandan kids really thinking and have some smart ideas. And get over yourselves, guys, they're smarter than us. This is the important thing to start to really unpack. You would never, at 10 years old, stand before Parliament and articulate clearly that you want to vote, very confidently with a clear narrative of why you want to vote, and if you give me an assessment. Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you, some university students today probably can't even do what that guy is doing, university graduates, what that 10-year-old boy did. That's the reality of the world. And if you have kids, by the way, just get out of their way and just allow them to be curious. All you can give them is values. Don't tell them to be engineers. We'll talk about engineering. This is a massive shift, guys, and the point I'm trying to illustrate is that this is not a linear shift in errors. This is a fundamental shift in how we organize and do business. And this fundamental shift was driven by something that completely changed our lives, the internet. But the internet and technology has also completely changed everything. The structures that we have today, without exception, all our companies, institutions, were built like factories. It's a product. It's not people on assembly lines, but it's people on desks who are doing the same thing. They're pushing emails. They're not asked to think. You move this email to the next. You have a job description. It's the same way a production line was. Because we were built and designed for that era, because that was relevant. Our education system, we're taught to learn a specific skill and not question. You get into industry, you work on that skill for 100 years or 50 years and retire. That's irrelevant. If you have not evolved your skill in 6 weeks, you're going to be redundant in 6 months. And nothing has prepared us for this. It's a real shock to the system. It's a fundamental shift. And it's scary because we're not speaking openly about it enough. This is why I'm very passionate about it. But let's move on to, like, what do we do next and how do we evolve? This is how typically we organize today. It's a basic setup. Most companies are set up like this, even New Vision Group. You have a set of products. It could be New Vision, Bukede, radio, blah, blah, blah. And even in those services or offerings, you might have in that offering specific products, a sports editor, whatever. This is how we're structured. You can take away the label of any company and put any label. They're set up in products. You focus on competition, and when I say competition, I mean traditional competition. You're always looking at what is Monitor Group doing or what is the other guy doing. You don't focus on what is Twitter doing, or what is Facebook doing, or is Amazon entering my space, or is Netflix rechanging content. You're not thinking about those. You're thinking about the guy next door. And obviously, this is obvious. I'm not going to talk about that. It's a focus on numbers, pure focus on numbers. How much are we pushing out? Has our top line gone up? What's our bottom line? This is the current, and to a certain extent, many companies have evolved, but to a large extent, this is how organizations are. We organize like this because we're in an era of scarcity. We're in an era of scarcity and efficiency. We're now in an era of abundance, and the models are completely different. It's not about your product, it's about experience and personalization. We go back to the 10-year-old boy. How much of your content speaks to me at an individual level? How much can I customize the content to me? And of course, with every industry, that's going to be as difficult as. But it's true. If it's not personalized, if it doesn't speak to me, I don't know if you have an app, you probably do. How much of that app can I customize for the experience that I want? You know, because today, if you download an app, whether in Uganda or the UK or wherever you are, the first thing you go is to settings and you change notifications, you change what you want to do. Are you doing that for your own content? Why not? Because we're no different. If I'm downloading a BBC app or BBC Sports app and I'm downloading a New Vision app, my expectation hasn't changed. Because suddenly I have experiences from all these guys, and that experience has become my norm. Let me be clear. The Amazon experience, the WhatsApp experience, the Facebook experience has become my norm. I don't think about this anymore. I don't think that that's a US company that's somewhere, blah, blah. I think that this experience is good for me. I love the user experience. I love the simplicity. I love the accessibility of content. I won't go to New Vision. The reality is that more and more of your subscribers or your customers are shifting to other channels that you might not know about. You don't have their attention. If I'm on WhatsApp and YouTube and Twitter most of the day, when am I going to be on New Vision? And if I get my content from my Twitter stream, why would I buy a newspaper? If something breaks now, if some was and I just opened my Twitter, I'd know about it. Or even I just opened my WhatsApp, it would be on like 10 groups alarming me that this has happened. Why would I need a newspaper? Why will I need to watch your New Vision television? And those are the things that you need to think about. This is real. Because today, yes, the numbers haven't shocked you because it's a transition. But one day they'll wake up and they'll completely shock you. Your son or daughter, when he gets to 16, and they're all, now, because the internet will eventually be universal. You will suddenly wake up and you've gone from 40 million users to 5. And what will you do? You'll close this infrastructure. You'll close this building. This is also not to scare you. It's to make you think. This shift is here. Competition to customer. We've talked a lot about this. I'm not going to unpack this for too much more. This is important. If you're always focusing on your customer, you never have to worry about competition. Because if you're always focusing on your customer, what you're doing is you're evolving your experience to meet his need. Which means that you will always be ahead of the game. Because the guy next door will only be looking at your newspaper. He'll be looking at your product. He won't understand that you've moved on. This is absolutely critical. It's all about customer focus, and it's also very difficult because even on a personal level, you need to think that what I'm doing as an individual, does it really make sense and engage? You need to challenge. You need to challenge your managing editor. You need to challenge your managing editor on content. You need to challenge your managing editor on experience. He needs to challenge you. You need to all think about your demographic. Uganda is one of the most scary demographics if you think about the digitization journey. And again, for me, we're a young country. These people, whether it's border guys or guys in Chikubo, go down everywhere, soon they'll all have smartphones. Some statistics are quite scary. Safe Border, when it started, border riders, only about 15–20% had smartphones. Today, 85% of border riders have smartphones. That didn't take 10 years. If you spoke to a normal guy that a normal sort of, no, it's going to take you, these guys, they won't have smartphones for 10 years. The need shifted immediately, and what do they have? They have a smartphone. This is your reality. And when they have a smartphone, guess what? They can also use Facebook. They can also use Instagram. That's true. That's true. I will give you a real-life example. Last year in May, I was giving a presentation to one of the operators in Tanzania. I finished my presentation. I went outside to get coffee. One of the guys serving coffee comes to me and says, Edgar, thank you for your presentation. I need your help. My Instagram is not really working on, and I'm not even on Instagram. I really should be, but my Instagram is not working on this Windows phone. I need to, and his English was not, he was half speaking Swahili, half speaking English. I looked at this guy and I'm like, in my mind I'm thinking, you're using Instagram? But I didn't say anything. I was like, no, I actually really don't know about this phone. He's like, yeah, I think I need to get a better phone because this one doesn't, I can't use these services properly. This was the guy serving tea. If you got any normal guy out there and told him that, they'll be like, yeah, those guys in the rural areas are not going to have a smartphone for 10 years. That's a mistake. My dad and mom use WhatsApp more than me today. 3 years ago, they didn't. But when they realized the only way they can communicate with their kids, who is in South Africa, UK, everywhere, or there are all these people everywhere on WhatsApp, they got WhatsApp. They're addicted to the thing. They don't know how to use this much on the smartphone, but they know how to go straight to WhatsApp because it solves a need. You will not have my dad's attention soon because as soon as he sits down, maybe he won't be watching TV. He'll be chatting with me on WhatsApp or on his Facebook groups. That's your reality. The needs shift, and when the needs shift, few people adapt, and they leave you behind. This is your reality. The customer. What is his need? This is probably the most important one for me because this journey starts to become more philosophical for me than anything because change is hard. If you're focusing on numbers, you will not make it. If you're focusing on why New Vision Group exists, because why was Vision Group? Why? Your purpose might be we exist to transform information. We exist to make information available to all Ugandans. Because once you have a clear sense of purpose, your channels, your products don't matter. Your purpose drives your ability to innovate. If you don't have a clear sense of purpose, everything else kicks in. Politics, trying to grow up the ladder, trying to be the managing editor like David, trying to get Robert's job, and in all that time, none is focusing on the customer who has moved. And why purpose is important is because this shift, and I'm going to tell you from personal experience because I'm also on this journey, is painful. Because most of us, we as society today, and this is why you should study these young kids. They're fascinating. That's why they're not obsessed with titles and people and positions. They don't get it once a guy walks in the room and you're all standing up. They're like, but who's this dude? Because it's not about title and position. It's about knowledge. And we grow up getting our relevance from our titles. When I worked in Ericsson, they would introduce me as Edgar, the head of IoT and emerging business for Ericsson. When I work in Retro Rabbit, many people don't even know I'm the CEO for the rest of Africa. That's not me, that's my title. But that doesn't define who I am. It doesn't define my ability to create and evolve. Because if you don't get over this title, you will die. I mean, in terms of you'll be disrupted. Because this title will not exist in 2 years. Man, it will exist it probably will exist, but what you're doing will be completely different. And eventually, it might not even exist at all. But that's the reality, and the reality is that most of us can adapt and evolve. And it's not that you shouldn't be proud of the experience that got you here. You should, for sure. I have 2 degrees in engineering. I'm so proud of that. It doesn't help me today, but I am proud of that. And it helped me for a long time in my life. But that's the reality. And that shift is hard, because why I say it's hard is the reality is that society today is organized to recognize title, position, power, not knowledge. Knowledge is more important. It doesn't matter what your title is, it will disappear. Even if you're president or minister or whatever, your job doesn't define your ability to grow. And that's why purpose is important, but we'll unpack that another day. David, you made a good point about even if I build this experience, these guys, they already know and they're moving on. That's why it has to always be day one. What it always means, it always be day one, is you have to continuously innovate. You can never stop. When you come into a company today, you have an idea what you're going to do. Tomorrow, challenge yourself and say, does it still make sense? And I'm probably making it hard. I mean, that eventually will be a culture. Because it might not make sense. Because overnight, there are a million kids around the world who are experimenting with models on media and content that could blow you away. And that's your reality, not one or two. And they're getting smarter and smarter. Coming back to the 10-year-old boy, they are. Honestly speaking, my son is 4 years old. I mean, just what I've been on this journey, I'm very, very clear that I am not a futurist, so this is arbitrary. I believe by the time he's 8, we'll probably be on the same intellectual level, just because of how much he's absorbing. I believe by the time he's 12, if I'm not growing, he'll be way ahead of me. And for me, I've accepted that. My job is to instill values in him, not to kill his curiosity. My job is not to tell him what to do, because I can't possibly imagine how fast he's growing, because I definitely was not exposed to that same world. I had a book, I started reading at 6 or 7. You know, you'd go to the library, borrow one book and have it for a week. In 1 hour, that guy has absorbed like 100 books. That's our reality. But also, how do we move forward? Today, this is how typically organizations are organized. We're almost about to finish. I know you want to go, David, but you should see the Volvo video before you go. This is how we're set up today in most organizations. Executives at the top focused on product strategy. That's flawed. It's a top-down approach. It's like we decide, and first of all, because the focus is on product, it's not on customer. It's like, these are our products, how do we make them better? How do we sell more of them? This is the new world. Everybody in Vision Group thinking about solving customer problems. And we'll unpack that another day, because that's the world. The companies that are thriving today, because you're all smart. And again, I go back to the 10-year-old video, because in the information era, we all know our minds are growing, they're not shrinking. And in fact, because human beings are stubborn, we want to be heard. We want to have our opinions out there. Listen to that guy who's selling coffee, because he might have the next brilliant idea for new vision to transform. Don't look at him because he's selling coffee, because he might have Googled something the night before that is unique. Listen to your junior editors or the guys. I don't know your structures. Listen to everybody. Allow ideas to come to the surface. Because if you do this, you will always be, if you're always thinking about solving customer problems, if everybody's always thinking about solving customer problems, you will be okay. If you're thinking about the products that you have in your shelf, you will not be okay. Stop looking at the world through the lens of your products, and that's bloody hard. I'll be honest with you. It takes time. I mean, this is a paradigm shift. It's a phenomenal shift, but this is how we exist. We have our products, and we think, how do we make these products better? How do we sell these products more to the world? Start looking at the world through the lens of the consumer. I've gone through this, so we've talked about the consumer the whole time. You must get ideas to the surface. Every company, without exception, that I personally believe, because human beings are getting smarter, and we don't have monopoly on information in the internet era, so get over yourselves. All of us have access to the same information. Every company has great ideas. They never come to the surface because of the structures. The structures are cake. The really cool companies now in the world actually are so flat. You know, in Google, if you have an idea, the CEO has a mandate to listen to you. Gmail was a result of some engineers playing around with a failed product and realized, oh, this is cool, you know, let's take it to our management. This could be a really cool application. We all use Gmail. It wasn't the idea of the CEO or some guy sitting in a boardroom. And those companies understand this culture because they know in order to innovate, everybody must be thinking every day. Innovation is not a department, it is a way of existing. Let me be clear. Currently it's a way of existing. You have to change. You cannot be comfortable. You have to, which is hard. You have to stretch yourself to a point that's uncomfortable. You have to think differently. And unfortunately, this usually happens when we're disrupted. But the reality is that this stuff is hard. That's the reality. The reality is transition and transformation is hard. The reality change is hard. This is just the human reality. And every time you try something new, the immune system will attack you. We could give so many examples of what technology is going to do for jobs, really, even already today. You know, if you bank and you have a relative who is a bank teller, you need to really be telling them to learn something new because those banks branches are going to close. They're already closing. You know, call center agents will be relevant. I mean, what we're already doing with AI and chatbots can blow your mind. I mean, even our company, Retro Rabbits, we've built a whole AI chatbot interface for insurance companies in South Africa, which means that you can get an insurance product without talking to anybody. You open the app and you go through a whole, what's your name, Edgar, you put in whatever, what's your terms, you're chatting. And you get a quote for insurance. And then you can access that quote and accept it. That's the world that we're in. But you can imagine to do that, you know how many people have taken out of the value system or the value chain. And organizations, your employees will be the same guys that will resist disruption because they'll be thinking about self-preservation. This is real. In organizations, it's the employees themselves that are the hindrance for them to pivot. Because as human beings, we've grown up doing one thing and we know it. We're paid for it. We're good at it. It pays our salaries, our mortgages. It's not personal. We depend on it. If you don't talk about reskilling, those same people are going to disrupt you. And if you don't talk about reskilling and move on, you will be disrupted out of business. You do not have a choice not to talk about reskilling, because you can put your head down and hide, and 6 months later you will anyway be firing people because you're closing, because someone has disrupted you or your numbers have dropped off a cliff. But that's why this conversation is about purpose. It's about really having honest reflections about change, about how do we evolve our business, how do we reskill people at an individual level and at a company level. Because if you're not, and it's not personal, you will be in trouble. World Economic Forum is already estimating that even by next year, 30% of mundane jobs will be automated and lost. This technology disruption is coming so fast, it's scary. We talk today traditionally about policy, mining and manufacturing. Growing work is getting factories. Factories are automated today. Amazon and Alibaba don't have people in their warehouses. It's all machines. That was the traditional world. And I repeat, that was the industrial era. It's a completely paradigm shift. And it's on an individual level. Whether you're David, managing editor, or Robert, CEO, or Patrick, public editor, whatever your role is, it's going to evolve. If you don't evolve, you will be irrelevant. But this stuff, this immune system will first kick in. Most companies struggle today because they cannot create an environment to change. And if you really care, you'll really understand where my customer is and how do I touch his hearts and minds. And everybody can do that. It's also important to understand that none of our go-to-market models today were built for a digital and informed consumer. They simply weren't. They were built for pushing out a product and efficiency. They were built for scarcity. The world has changed. Our customers changed. That 10-year-old boy is in control. I'm in control. I want a personalized experience. I don't want to know what you're sending me. I want to know what speaks to me. And that's the reality. And ultimately, it's about purpose and culture. To make this transition is not about strategy. It's about really a deep personal journey to change. You have to prototype. You have to create together with the environment. You have to take risks. You have to take bets. You have to learn all the time. You have to get over your hypothesis. It's great to have a hypothesis. It's only as good as if you test it in the market. Once you test it in the market and it doesn't work, you move on. It's okay. It's okay to not to be wrong. It's okay to really think that this would have made sense, but if the public tells you it doesn't, then you move on. It's the only way you stay relevant. And relevance doesn't stay, it doesn't last. You have to pivot, which is the whole thing I was talking about. This is the most important quote for me. The 21st century is different. It's a century of learning and unlearning. It's a century of evolving. It's not about knowing how to read and write, and it's not about your degree. Get over that. It's not about the fact that I did this for 20 years and I'm good. It's not about having expertise. It's about continuously evolving. Thank you so much, guys.